Hello and welcome back. This is my fourth video in a series of videos, 10 Steps to the Ether. There's 3 videos before this, and if you haven't already checked these ones out, I suggest you go and have a look at those ones. In today's episode, we're going to spend a bit of time looking at that famous equation commonly attributed to Einstein, E equals mc². We'll also have a look at some of our old stories in our culture that may relate to this concept. Have a look at how there might be some echoes of the ether in other stories we have. We'll have a look at some cavitation footage and then a quick shout out at the end. So E equals mc². I remember seeing this equation a lot when I was younger, particularly after the release of the classic Australian comedy film Young Einstein in 1988. E equals mc² was everywhere at the time, but I'd never really stopped and thought about what it meant. So we're going to have a bit of a look at that now. E equals mc². What does it mean? What that's saying to us is that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. We can see here that energy can equal mass, along with this factor of c, the speed of light squared. Now we remember from last week when we were talking about the permeability of space-time and the speed of light, we understand the speed of light is a big number, 300 million meters per second. And if we square that number, multiply it by itself, we end up with an astronomically big number. So what we can see from this is that if we have even a tiny bit of mass, and we multiply that by a huge number, we're going to end up with a large amount of energy. What this is telling us that inside every bit of mass that we can see, there is a huge amount of stored or contained energy within that mass. And this is what makes nuclear power and nuclear weapons so powerful. They operate on this principle of converting mass into energy. If we have a look at this equation, or take a nuclear bomb for an example, if we have a megaton bomb, that's the equivalent of 1 million tons of TNT explosive. We can work through this equation and find out how much mass is required to be converted into energy to result in that giant explosion. And we can see that the amount of mass required is quite trivial, 46.6 grams. That's probably the equivalent of a small rock or 3 big coins, a very small amount of mass converted into a giant amount of energy. Looking at this equation a bit further, we can rearrange the formula. We can transpose it and move the c² term to the other side. If we divide both sides by c², we'll end up with a new formula that says energy divided by the speed of light squared equals mass. So we can take a huge amount of energy, divide it by a huge number, and get a small amount of mass out of it. And I want to dive a little bit deeper again by looking at what c is. C is speed, and we know that speed is made up of distance and time, like kilometers per hour or meters per second. We have distance and time, or we could say we have space and time. So if we divide energy by space and time, we can get mass. Or another way of saying this, maybe if we constrain energy by space and time, we can have mass. So when trying to understand this a bit further, that mass is energy caught by space and time, I took inspiration from one of Ken Wheeler's videos where he used these torus slinkies to describe something similar. I can imagine that we have a sea of unlimited, dimensionless, timeless energy as a whole ocean of these collapsed slinkies just sitting out there. Unlimited potential, timeless, dimensionless energy, which we then catch in space and time and create something out of it, create an object out of it. I can imagine one of these objects of trapped energy resonating harmonically with itself and with other trapped energy particles to come together and form the gluons and quarks and protons and neutrons that make up all our matter. If we're saying that all mass is trapped energy, ultimately we must have some sort of energetic structure that's containing that energy and forms the mass of our reality. But Chris, don't atoms look like this? Well, that's what we're told, and maybe if we have a closer look at this visualizing the nucleus video from MIT, we can see that when they visualize the nucleus of an atom, we can see it's a swirling soup of quarks and gluons and energy. And I can imagine that at the deepest, smallest level, we have little structures, little energetic structures like this, that are trapped energy, resonating harmonically with each other, being bound to each other, attracted, repelled. The structures of some might make them positive, others might be negative, and that allows them to bind together and form these neutrons and protons and the building blocks of all the matter around us and that makes up us, ourselves. This line of thinking leads me to think that all mass is made up of trapped energy. Trapped energy in different resonances and harmonics, resulting in positive or negative charges, interacting with each other to form these higher order structures of protons and neutrons and atoms, ultimately resulting in the matter all around us and the matter that makes us up. Is everything just trapped energy? Now, I know I said it's easy to get lost in this rabbit hole, but we're going to poke our head a little bit deeper into this rabbit hole because it's fun. But don't worry, I have a head torch and I've got my safety rope, so we should be fine to dive in and have a bit of a look down here. So if everything around us is made of energy, what is the source of this energy? Now, I don't know what the source of this energy is, but when I look at texts from around the world and in our history, I can find some interesting clues. Like at the start of the Bible, where it says, "And the earth was formless and dark. And then God said, 'Let there be light.'" Is this light the source of the energy that forms all the matter around us? And then we can have a look at Hinduism and the concept of Brahman in Hinduism. This philosophy tells us that Brahman is the ultimate reality, the only real entity. It stands apart from time, transcending birth and death, and past and present and future. It's timeless. It is consciousness and all knowledge and intelligence. It is the primordial seed of creation. It is the universe, all things manifest and all things unmanifest. A timeless, omnipresent source of energy. Is this the source of energy that everything is made out of? This line of thinking gets me to a point where I think we could almost science our way to God. But that's where the rabbit hole gets deep. And we're going to pull ourselves back out now and get back to the physics and the science of it all. I'm no religious scholar, and I'm sure there's probably more examples across our world of this. And I'd love to hear about them if you have any ideas. So a quick recap. We have E equals mc². We're saying energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, or energy divided by the speed of light squared can equal mass. And as we saw last week, the speed of light, c, is actually a product of those two variables, the permittivity and permeability. So it makes me wonder, if we could play with those variables and adjust the value of c, what impact would that have on our E equals mc² equation? So we briefly spoke about how some of our oldest stories could relate to some of these concepts. I've also seen echoes of the ether in a lot of our other stories, a lot of our common stories we have. We've made movies out of them, we've had books written about them, and one example of that is Aladdin's lamp. So if we have a look at the story of Aladdin and Aladdin's lamp, we see Aladdin has this magic lamp, and when he rubs this magic lamp, a blue genie comes out of it, and this blue genie can do magic and grant wishes. He also has a magic flying carpet. I imagine that by rubbing his lamp, he could be setting up a resonance in this lamp, a bit like a Tibetan singing bowl or a wine glass that's being resonated, or even our ultrasonic cavitation cleaners. And if this lamp were specially designed with the right shaped cavities and the right materials, I believe resonating a structure like this could result in the dissociation of water or production of cold plasma. And maybe this cold plasma comes out of the lamp, and that's what we're calling the genie. And now if Aladdin has knowledge of plasma and the ether, he might be able to use this plasma to generate ether whirlwinds and undertake magical acts. He might even be able to use this plasma to generate a torus, which he can use his carpet to then ride. I've put together a short little AI video here to help convey this image.
I'm diving into the intriguing science behind the legend of Aladdin's magic lamp. Yes, you heard that right. The story of Aladdin might just be rooted in some fascinating scientific principles involving the mysterious ether and plasma. Let's start with the iconic lamp. When Aladdin rubs the lamp, he's not just summoning a genie out of thin air. Think of it like rubbing a wine glass to make it sing. By rubbing the lamp, Aladdin is creating resonant frequencies. Now these resonant frequencies are no joke. They create standing pressure waves of high and low pressure inside the lamp, which is enough to cavitate water. Cavitation is a process where rapid changes in pressure create vapor bubbles in a liquid. These bubbles then collapse, producing shock waves. So why is this important? The internal geometry and materials of Aladdin's lamp are key. They set up the correct acoustic and physical conditions to generate a plasma toroid. A plasma toroid is essentially a ring of plasma, a state of matter where gas is energized until atomic particles break apart into electrons and ions. Here's where it gets even cooler. This plasma toroid draws in the ether, a substance once thought to fill space. In this context, it's a stand-in for the energy that fuels the plasma. This process produces vast quantities of cold plasma, which is a plasma at relatively low temperatures. And guess what? This cold plasma starts pouring out of the lamp, creating that mystical blue mist we associate with the genie. But Aladdin's real magic comes from his deep understanding of ether and plasma. With this knowledge, he can do extraordinary things. For example, he can cut through hard materials with ease, much like modern plasma cutters. He can also transmute base materials into rare elements, essentially performing alchemical feats. And remember that magic flying carpet? Aladdin can generate a larger plasma torus, which acts like a cushion of air, allowing him to ride on it. This creates the illusion of a magic carpet ride, but it's all based on plasma dynamics.
So what do you think? Is there any truth in the story of Aladdin's lamp? In this episode's cavitation session, we're going to go back to one of the first videos where I saw the orbs for the first time. Do a bit of a deeper dive in there and see if we can see any elements that might contribute to how these orbs are made. So we're just going to watch the clip in full speed here. I've just highlighted a spot there where the patterns sort of slow down. We'll have a closer look at that one in a minute. So that's the full clip, about 13 seconds long at full speed. We're going to slow it down now and have a look at the patterns in the water, particularly during the slower part of the activity there. So I've slowed it right down here and we can see the patterns. My hypothesis is that these patterns are not just cymatics in the water, but they actually represent plasma channels, mini Birkeland currents or filaments. They seem to arrange themselves in a hexagonal lattice, like a network of plasma channels, and these can form orbs at the nodes or the pinches. The structures, the little orb structures, they get larger and larger as the principal EVO lodged in the aluminium can is preparing to reorganise to a larger structure. Following this reorganisation, the patterns in the water become smaller and the process starts all over again. So here we're going to look at the origin of these little cavitation orbs. Where are the initial seed orbs coming from? If we look up in the top right of the screen there, we can see where they sort of emerge or appear, so we'll zoom in and have a little look there. We can see in the top corner there are these faint white orbs appearing, organising, and then one of them is ejected to start growing into a larger orb, which is capable of then joining the main EVO. It's my hypothesis that there's actually a stream of cold plasma running around the inside corner of the bowl, and this is where those seed orbs are coming from. Again, we're going to have a look at the slower part of the video. we'll be having a closer look at what I think is this plasma mist or filaments or network. So we'll slow it down in a second here. And we can really see those filaments sort of showing their patterns. And to me, they really look similar to the things you'd see in a plasma ball, right? Those plasma filaments in a plasma ball. And I believe they're channeling that misty plasma into the main torus structure through this network of channels in the water. Again, just watching, we can see they look like channels. There's pinch points where sometimes a little plasma structure seems to form. But it's hard for me to say that that's just patterns in the water when you can see correlations with different activity in the orbs there. And then after the slow part, the process restarts and we'll start to see some larger orbs coming back in again. This structure here, you can see there's 3 sort of nodes on that one. Yeah, so as the process restarts, we'll start to see these orbs start to come out. So I would assume at this point the main EVO has gone through a restructure and now the process is starting again. I've paused on this one to show it looks like there's 3 orbs. And there's our face there as well. So we have a lighter structure in the front, the main orb in the middle, and a darker orb at the back. You can see they just continue to grow and join in. We have a triangular formation of orbs there. We see the triangle pattern quite often in these cavitation sessions. And then we're going to go back to the start of the video again, and up in the top corner on the bowl there, again, it could just be reflections of light in the water, but it looks like a sort of a lightning or some sort of a flux type structure happening there, a luminous loop appearing and disappearing. Yeah, you can see those little white plasma dots floating around in there. And then we can see what I'm calling the waves of plasma and the ejection of little seed orbs coming out to start the process of growing and joining into the main orbs. There's one shooting out there, another one coming out. All right, and here we're going to pause on a couple of snapshots and just have a look at some of these orb structures as they appear. So we pause there, we can see there's a multitude in different patterns, often forming triangles or multiple triangles, different formations there. We're going to go up the top here, we're going to see quite an interesting ejection there for a seed orb coming out. So he's gone dark and he's just about to pop out there with a bit of speed, goes dark again, and then starts forming into the regular plasma orb that we see. Gathering energy, building in size, I believe, to match the size of the principal EVO that it's going to join into and add to the power of that main EVO. All right, so it's my hypothesis that what we've got here is we've got one principal EVO lodged in the aluminium can down the bottom. He's producing a lot of plasma. This plasma is running around the edge of the bowl, and that's where these seed orbs are coming out of to travel back through and rejoin that principal EVO and allow it to build in strength. Ultimately, once it gets up to 48 wheels within that EVO, it needs to reorganize and grow to the next size structure. In this week's shout out, I want to give a quick shout out to Salvatore Pais. Salvatore Pais is an engineer that's worked on top secret projects. He's got his name on a few patents for some really interesting technology, and he's been on a number of podcasts and shows sharing what he's allowed to share. We're going to take a quick dive into one of Salvatore Pais's patents now and see there might be a little element that also relates back to our E equals MC² discussion. So we'll have a little look at that now. So we're going to have a look at Salvatore Pais's patent for a plasma compression fusion device. There's a couple of pictures in this patent and we'll see if we can make sense of it. So a quick look at the abstract. We have a plasma compression fusion device that has at least one pair of counter-spinning dynamic fuses. It injects fuel through the orifices and has magnetic and electric fluxes on there. Have a look at the device here. We have at least two pairs of these smoothly curved counter-rotating conical structures. They are spinning within a hollow vacuum chamber. And item 205 there shows where the fuel comes out of the orifices into the vacuum chamber 110, where we make a plasma core, number 75 there in the middle. The fuel recommended is deuterium, heavy hydrogen, which Salvatore says we can get out of seawater, so it's very abundant. We'll have a closer look at one of these fuses now. So 202 is electrified grids. 203 there is a toroidal magnetic coil. So we have the toroidal magnetic coil generating magnetic flux. And the plasma is electrostatically accelerated with the electrical grids, which can be positive or negative. And the magnetic flux is always pointing towards the center, towards the plasma core, number 75. And then fusion power can be extracted from this machine via a heat exchanger, which wraps around the whole device, which it doesn't show that in the patent. So he's suggesting here that this plasma device can generate gigawatt to terawatt power ranges. So essentially we have these 2 to 4 spinning dynamic fuses with electric and magnetic fields, and we're injecting fuel, namely deuterium gas, into that, and these fields hold the plasma core in the center, which can generate excess heat and energy through the fusion of the fuel. And tying this back to our E equals MC² equation, this energy is coming from a change in mass. From the average deuterium-deuterium fusion event, releases approximately 3.6 megaelectron volts, and if we achieve 10 to the power of 20 reactions per second, this machine could potentially make about 600 kilowatt hours per hour. So thank you, Salvatore, for sharing what you can and sharing these patents with us. Well, that brings us to the end of our 4th episode. Again, thanks for watching. Next week, we're going to have a look at plasma, how plasma is formed, how it behaves, how it can self-organize. So I hope you can join me for that one. Rodas.
In Agrabah sands, where secrets are kept, lies a tale of a lamp where science is swept. Aladdin, a genius with knowledge so grand, crafted a device with plasma in hand. Aladdin's lamp is not what you think. It's ether and plasma on the brink. Resonance hums with a magical sound. From the lamp, the genie is bound. Within this lamp, a chamber of might, water and aluminum under the night. A dance of particles in cold plasma's glow. From physics and science, the magic does flow. Aladdin's lamp, a science unseen, creates a genie, pure and serene. With ether's touch and resonance blend, magic and science, they transcend. Fly on a carpet through sky so clear, with knowledge of plasma, there's nothing to fear. The fairy tale told in books of old lore is physics at play forevermore. So when you hear of wishes and might, think of the ether, of plasma's light, Aladdin's tale. It's not just for fun. Science unseen creates a genie, pure and serene. With ether's touch and resonance blend, magic and science, they transcend. Fly on a carpet through skies so clear. With knowledge of plasma, there's nothing to fear. The fairy tale told in books of old lore is physics at play forevermore. So when you hear of wishes and might, think of the ether, of plasma's light, Aladdin's tale. It's not just for fun.